Hey, what's up? My name is Chris number 2.
My name is Justin Sane.
We are half of the band ANTIFLAG, and you're watching MULATSCHAG, the only TV that ever mattered. Maybe. That ever matters? What is it? Okay, got it.
Flawless.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
MULATSCHAG!
The first one is, especially in the USA, the flag is holy as fuck. Aren't you afraid to get shot because of your band name?
Yeah, I mean, I when we started the band, a big part of choosing the name Anti-Flag was to be inflammatory because we wanted people to think about why they are so devoted to the flag. Because what we saw the flag as growing up, especially during the first Iraq War, is we saw the flag being marched out by politicians every time politicians wanted people to do things that was not in their best interest. And in this particular case, it was the first Iraq War, which was very obviously a war for oil. And they marched the flag out and made it this very patriotic cause. And so that was when the initial idea for the name Anti-Flag came about. And that was a political statement that we wanted to make. And, you know, it's a name that causes a dialogue and causes people to ask, you know, well, why do they name their band Anti-Flag? You know, are they against the flag? Why don't they like the flag? You know, do they hate all flags? And, you know, ultimately, you know, I think that just like racism or sexism or bigotry, you know, flags or religion, you know, flags are something that are used to divide people. And quite often, the people who are trying to divide those people are politicians that are owned by corporations, and so we stand by the name for that reason.
Yeah, and we survived being a band on September 12th, 2001. And I think that there was never a time in America where nationalism was as high as it was right after September 11th. So that was probably the most difficult period to be called Anti-Flag. You had threats being put against you. You were going to places where they wouldn't put your show on. No one would sell our records or T-shirts or anything like that. So it was definitely the time where we felt most censored, but we also believed it to be a very important time to continue to be Anti-Flag. So there are times where you run into people who want to impose their ideology upon you through violence. That's called fascism, and you should stand up against it, and that's what Anti-Flag believes in and stands for.
What are your thoughts about the refugee crisis? Who's to blame? Who?
Yeah, I think, you know, for me, I like to kind of preface all of the things that we do when speaking about the refugee issue that's happening at hand, a crisis that's happening at hand, is that we're 4 kids from a town called Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and we're so far removed from the front lines of what's happening here that to consider us experts on it or to consider us knowing more than anyone else knows or having a better strategy or better plan, we're just trying to lend voices of support and solidarity because we're on the side of empathy and we're on the side of humanity. And I don't necessarily know what we would do with all of these people if they came over, but I know that turning our backs on them is inhumane. And so I like to believe that in progressive nations like Austria and Germany and Hungary, that there are people that are smart enough that once we assess this problem, we can then help these people either get back to their own lives that they want to be living, or we can actually go back to the beginning of the problem and have a discussion about weaponry and bombing and warfare and corporations that have created this crisis in the beginning because we want resources that come from their land, and then we can get into an anti-war movement, and that's really gonna you know go back to the beginning and hopefully erase some of the turmoil that these folks are running from in the first place. So
yeah, and looking at, you know, why are these wars fought? I mean, countries like Austria, Germany, France, the United States, Russia, China, they export a lot of arms around the world, and there's war is big money for these countries. And on one hand, I hear some politicians talking in Europe saying, "Oh, we have to help these refugees." Well, I totally agree with them, but they could have helped them by limiting and doing away with the arms trade that makes it possible for this warfare to happen.
Syria, yeah.
And I will say this though, during a crisis is when many political figures will take an opportunity to take advantage of people, to scare people, and to push through regressive, right-wing kind of doctrine and laws. And I think it's really important for people not to let the politics of fear, the politics of the other, scare them away from actually doing the right thing, but also giving up their freedoms. Turning their backs on justice. This could be a time when people's personal liberties can be taken away because there is a crisis, and in my mind, that's the worst possible thing that the people of Austria and the people of Europe can do. I think it's just coming from a humanitarian standpoint. This is a time for people to actually stand up for justice, for freedom, for what's right, and to say that we have to be empathetic. We have to put ourselves in these people's shoes. We have to understand that these people are refugees and that they're fleeing something horrible. And if we were in their position, how would we want to be treated? No. And so coming at it from that frame of mind, it's important for all nations to step forward and do the right thing. And I believe that that's the kind of pressure that we have to put on our politicians over in the U.S. and in Europe, places that there are countries that aren't affected by this crisis, but it's their humanitarian duty to be involved.
MULATSCHAG!